Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. Her scream died in her throat as they moved closer. The subway car rattled through the darkness, its fluorescent lights flickering like dying hope. She clutched her phone tighter, thumb hovering over the emergency call button, but fear paralyzed her fingers. Around her, 5 passengers stared at their screens, headphones firmly in place, eyes deliberately avoiding the scene unfolding before them. "Nowhere to go now, sweetheart," the taller one laughed, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. His friend blocked the door, switching his gaze between her trembling form and the oblivious passengers. The train screeched around a curve, throwing shadows across faces that refused to see, refused to help. The distant station was still 3 minutes away, an eternity in this metal tomb of collective indifference. In the far corner, partially hidden by shadow, a hooded figure shifted. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried purpose. As the man reached toward her arm, the figure stood. Nobody recognized him yet, just another passenger in a dark hoodie and worn jeans. But in seconds, they would all remember this night, and the lesson about courage that would follow them long after they stepped off this train. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. She had made this mistake before, working late, missing the last crowded train, catching one of those empty night cars where each passenger was an island unto themselves. The 2 men had boarded 3 stops ago, their loud laughter cutting through the mechanical hum of the subway. At first they had kept to themselves, 2 figures swaying slightly with the motion of the train, exchanging crude jokes. Then their attention had shifted to her. It started with stares, then comments just loud enough for her to hear. She had tried the usual defenses, headphones, phone screen, focused attention on the subway map, but they had only moved closer. The other passengers scattered throughout the car had noticed. She had seen the moment of recognition in their eyes, that instant of decision when each one chose to look away. A businessman tightened his grip on his briefcase. A nurse coming off shift adjusted her scrubs and stared harder at her phone. A college student turned up his music, the tinny beat barely audible. A couple leaned closer to each other, creating their own protective bubble. "Hey, we're talking to you," the shorter one said, moving to sit directly across from her. His jacket was expensive, his watch gleaming under the harsh light. Not some desperate vagrant, but something worse. Entitlement wrapped in designer clothes. Her hand gripped her phone like a lifeline, but who would she call? The police wouldn't arrive in time. The emergency button was 3 body lengths away, past the men who now controlled the space around her. The train's mechanical voice announced 2 more stops. Too many minutes trapped in this moving cage. "Just want to talk," the taller one said, teeth flashing in what might have been a smile in another context. But here, surrounded by fluorescent lights and averted gazes, it was something feral. He slid closer, reducing the space between them. "Where you heading so late all alone?" She mumbled something about home, eyes darting toward the other passengers. The businessman checked his watch, his face a practiced mask of indifference. The nurse seemed to be counting the stops, perhaps calculating her own escape. The college student had closed his eyes entirely, an active choice to disappear from this reality. The couple whispered to each other, their discomfort evident in hunched shoulders and quick glances. In the far corner, the hooded figure hadn't moved since the men had started their approach. Just another bystander, she thought bitterly. Another witness who would do nothing. Then she noticed something. While everyone else avoided looking at the scene, this person was watching. not with the nervous glances of the other passengers, but with direct, focused attention. The shorter man placed his hand on the pole next to her head, creating a cage with his arm. "Maybe we can keep you company," he suggested, his voice carrying across the car. The words hung in the air, a public challenge. Would anyone respond? Would anyone intervene? The businessman adjusted his tie, gaze firmly fixed on the floor. The nurse clutched her bag tighter. The college student turned up his music another notch, the sound of his deliberate disconnect leaking from his headphones. The couple debated in urgent whispers. She could see the conflict on their faces, the man's hand on the woman's arm, holding her back from doing something, anything. "Please," she managed, the word barely audible over the screech of the train's wheels. "Just leave me alone." Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, small, frightened, a fracture of its usual strength. But even that weak protest seemed to anger them. "Stuck up," the taller one said, moving to block her view of the door. "We're just being friendly." The train lurched suddenly around a bend, throwing everyone off balance. The hooded figure in the corner used this moment to stand, one fluid motion that drew no attention. As the train righted itself, he took a step forward, then another. The fluorescent lights caught his face as the hood shifted, and that's when her breath caught. Behind the casual stubble and watchful eyes was a face millions would recognize. Keanu Reeves stepped into the center of the car, his presence suddenly filling the space that had seemed so empty of humanity moments before. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. The two men didn't notice him at first, their attention still locked on their target. The taller one leaned closer to her, saying something only she could hear that made her press harder against the window. But something had shifted in the subway car, a subtle change in atmosphere that radiated from the approaching figure. The businessman looked up from his studied indifference, blinking in confusion. The nurse's eyes widened in recognition. The college student removed one earbud, suddenly present. The couple stopped whispering, their attention redirected. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable gravity. Nothing theatrical, nothing forced, just two simple words that stopped all other sound in the car. The shorter man turned, irritation flashing across his face at the interruption, then freezing as recognition dawned. "No way," he muttered, straightening up. His friend, slower to understand, kept his position looming over the woman. "I think the lady would like some space," Keanu continued, now standing just a few feet away. He wasn't playing a character now. No John Wick intensity. No Neo certainty. This was something different, something genuine. A real person choosing to step into an ugly moment. The taller man finally turned, squinting at the actor. "Mind your own business, man. We're just talking." Keanu's gaze shifted to the woman, a silent question in his eyes. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. No, this wasn't just talking. No, this wasn't welcome. No, she was not okay. "I don't think that's true," Keanu replied, his voice remaining calm but firm. Something in his stance had changed. Not aggressive, but unmovable. The other passengers were now fully engaged. Phones lowered, headphones removed. The businessman half rose from his seat. The nurse's hand moved to her bag. The student stood up entirely. The couple separated, both leaning forward. The shorter man recovered quickly, celebrity recognition transforming into something else. An opportunity, a story to tell later. "Hey, you're Keanu Reeves," he said, smiling now, as if they were all suddenly friends. "Big fan, man. We were just having some fun." "Doesn't look like fun for everyone," Keanu replied, his eyes still holding that calm certainty. He took another step closer, positioning himself slightly between the woman and the two men. Not dramatically, not with the choreographed precision of his action movies, but with the simple purpose of creating a barrier. "Come on, it's not like that," the taller one protested, but his voice had lost its edge. The power dynamic had shifted, not because of celebrity, but because someone had finally broken the silence of complicity. The train announcement system crackled to life, announcing the next station in 60 seconds. The nurse stood now, moving closer to the woman. "Are you okay?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, her earlier passivity replaced with purpose. The businessman rose completely, briefcase in hand, no longer pretending to be elsewhere. The student removed his headphones entirely. The couple separated, both ready to act. "This is ridiculous," the shorter man said, trying to reclaim control of the situation. "We're getting off at the next stop anyway." He glanced at his friend, a silent communication passing between them. The train began to slow, the screech of brakes filling the momentary silence. "I think that's a good idea," Keanu said, not with threat, but with the simple weight of moral certainty. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made any aggressive moves. He'd simply chosen to be present when others had chosen absence. The woman found her voice at last. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words directed not just at Keanu but at the nurse now standing beside her, at the others who had finally chosen to see her. The train pulled into the station, doors sliding open with a mechanical sigh. The two men hesitated, caught between embarrassment and defiance. The shorter one tried once more to salvage the situation, turning to Keanu with forced casualness. "Hey, could I get a picture before we go? No one's gonna believe this." The request hung in the air, stunningly inappropriate in the aftermath of what had just occurred. The businessman made a sound of disbelief. The nurse stepped closer to the woman, a silent alliance. The college student let out a short, incredulous laugh. The couple exchanged glances of disgust. Keanu's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "No," he said simply. "I don't think that would be appropriate. No sermon, no lecture, just a boundary, firmly drawn." The taller man grabbed his friend's arm. "Let's go," he muttered, pulling him toward the open doors. They stepped onto the platform, immediately reaching for their phones, probably to tweet about the celebrity encounter, already rewriting the narrative in their minds, erasing their own wrongdoing from the story. As the doors closed, separating them from the train car, something profound happened. The remaining passengers looked at each other, really looked, as if seeing one another for the first time. The artificial barriers that had kept them isolated in their urban bubbles had dissolved. The businessman straightened his jacket and nodded to the woman. The nurse asked again if she was all right, offering water from her bag. The student smiled awkwardly, apologetic. The couple moved closer, the woman offering a tissue, her partner asking if she needed to call someone. Keanu stepped back, watching this transformation with quiet satisfaction. He hadn't just stopped two men from harassing a woman, he had broken a spell of indifference that had trapped everyone in that car. The train pulled away from the station, carrying them forward into a changed atmosphere. The silence that had once been heavy with fear and avoidance now held something else: shared humanity. Rediscovered. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. The woman wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts to maintain composure. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, looking first at Keanu, then at the others who had finally stepped forward. "All of you." Keanu returned to his seat, somehow making himself smaller again, less the center of attention. But the businessman cleared his throat, stepping into the space Keanu had vacated. "Don't thank us," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We should have done something sooner." He looked around at the other passengers, his gaze a challenge and a confession. "I should have done something." The nurse nodded, sitting down beside the woman. "We all should have," she admitted. "I kept thinking someone else would step in." She glanced at Keanu with a mixture of admiration and shame. It shouldn't have taken someone famous to make us remember our humanity. The train continued through the dark tunnel, the rhythmic clacking of wheels against tracks punctuating the conversation that had opened among them. The college student shuffled his feet, looking younger than before. I didn't know what to do," he confessed. "I was scared they might have a weapon or something." He twisted his headphones in his hands, the barrier he had used to shut out the world now just a tangled cord. "Fear is understandable," Keanu said quietly, drawing their attention. "Acting despite fear, that's the hard part." He wasn't performing, wasn't delivering a practiced line. There was something in his voice that suggested personal knowledge, hard-won wisdom. The couple moved closer to the center of the car, abandoning their earlier isolation. "It's the bystander effect," the woman of the couple said, her academic knowledge suddenly relevant. "The more people present, the less likely anyone is to help. We all assume someone else will take responsibility." "But that's just it," her partner added, building on her thought. "We use these psychological terms to explain away our failure to act, as if naming the phenomenon absolves us." He looked at each of them in turn. "I've studied this. I've written papers on it. And still I sat there and did nothing." The businessman nodded, his earlier practiced indifference completely abandoned. "Every day on this subway, in this city, we practice not seeing each other. We perfect the art of looking away." He gestured at the phones they all carried. "We have devices specifically designed to help us ignore the humans sitting right next to us." The harassed woman straightened slightly, finding strength in their collective reckoning. "I've been on the other side too," she admitted. "I've seen things and looked away. It's easier. Until you're the one needing help." Keanu leaned forward, elbows on his knees. In the harsh fluorescent light of the subway car, he looked like any other tired commuter, except for the careful attention with which he listened. "We're taught not to get involved," he said, "to mind our own business. But when does someone else's suffering become our business?" This question hung in the air between them, profound in its simplicity. The nurse was the first to answer. "When we see it," she said firmly, "that's the moment it becomes our business. Not because we're heroes, but because we're human." The college student nodded, something shifting in his young face. "I always wondered what I'd do in a situation like this. Now I know." I froze. "But next time—" He didn't finish the thought, but his resolution was clear in his expression. The train announcement system crackled again, announcing the next station. The woman who had been harassed gathered her things. "This is my stop," she said, standing with new steadiness. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm glad this happened. Not the harassment," she clarified quickly, "but this conversation, this moment." As the train slowed, approaching her station, something remarkable happened. The businessman stepped toward the door. "I'll walk you to the exit," he said. Not asking, not suggesting, simply stating a new reality where strangers protected one another. "I'm heading that way too," the nurse added, gathering her things. The college student nodded, putting away his headphones entirely. "Same," he said. The couple exchanged a glance and stood as well. "We're all getting off," the woman of the couple announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And perhaps it was. Perhaps this was how humans were meant to move through the world, in solidarity rather than isolation. The doors opened, and they all stepped onto the platform together, a small procession of newfound connection. Keanu rose to follow them, hanging back slightly, allowing this moment to be theirs rather than dominated by his celebrity. On the platform, the woman turned to face them all. "My name is Sarah," she said, offering this personal detail as a gift, transforming herself from anonymous victim to known individual. One by one, they introduced themselves. Mark, the businessman; Elena, the nurse; Jason, the student; Diane and Michael, the couple. Simple exchanges that felt revolutionary in a city where millions passed each other daily without a word. "Thank you all," Sarah said again, her voice stronger now. "Not just for getting off at my stop, but for—" she gestured vaguely, searching for words, "for becoming real to each other." Keanu remained slightly separate from their circle, watching with quiet satisfaction. His intervention had catalyzed something, but what was happening now was beyond him. It was about these specific people, in this specific moment, choosing connection over indifference. Mark checked his watch, not in dismissal this time, but in practical consideration. "It's late. We should make sure you get to where you're going safely." The others nodded in agreement, this impromptu community already setting norms, establishing care as their baseline. As they moved toward the station exit together, Sarah glanced back at Keanu, who hadn't joined their procession. Their eyes met in silent understanding. His part in this story was complete. He had disrupted the pattern of indifference, but the new pattern forming now belonged to them. It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Three days later, a post appeared on Twitter. It spread quickly, gathering likes and shares at an exponential rate. "To the people who walked me home from the subway Tuesday night, thank you again." And yes, that really was Keanu Reeves who stepped in when no one else would. But the real story isn't about him. It's about what happened after. Attached was a photo taken at the top of the subway stairs. 5 ordinary people standing together under the streetlight. Sarah in the middle, surrounded by her impromptu security detail. Their faces showed a mixture of lingering concern and unexpected joy. Strangers transformed into guardians. Isolation into connection. The replies flooded in immediately. Some focused only on the celebrity angle. "OMG, Keanu is such a hero." But many more engaged with the deeper story. Why did it take a famous person to make others help? I've been that bystander too many times. This made me cry. Going to do better. Mark, the businessman, saw the post during a meeting. He excused himself for a moment, stepping into the hallway to collect himself before returning. That evening, he signed up as a volunteer for a community safety program. Elena, the nurse, showed the post to her colleagues in the hospital break room. "That's me," she said, pointing to her image. "That night changed something for me." She started organizing a workshop on bystander intervention for hospital staff. Jason, the college student, printed the tweet and pinned it to his dorm room wall. Below it, he wrote, "Reminder, be brave." The next week, when he saw a classmate being bullied, he didn't hesitate to step in. Diane and Michael, the couple, created a group chat for the 5 of them. "Tuesday Night Heroes," Michael named it, half joking but also acknowledging the significance of what they'd experienced together. They planned to meet for coffee the following weekend, not out of obligation, but genuine desire to maintain the connection that had formed in that subway car. The story continued to spread, moving beyond social media into news outlets. Keanu Reeves intervenes in subway harassment was the initial headline, but as journalists contacted Sarah, the narrative evolved. The real heroes. What happened after Keanu Reeves's subway intervention became the focus of a thoughtful piece on urban isolation and community responsibility. A local radio host discussed the incident on his morning show. So yeah, Keanu Reeves being a stand-up guy isn't news. But ordinary people walking a stranger home at midnight? That's the revolution, folks. The two harassers saw the story, too. The shorter one deleted his Twitter account after attempting to post his own version of events and receiving immediate backlash. The taller one sent a private message to Sarah, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that he'd taken things too far. She didn't respond, but forwarded the message to the police department's harassment division. A week later, a different woman found herself in a similar situation on a different train line. A man was making increasingly aggressive comments, following her from car to car. She felt the familiar fear, the weight of public indifference. Then, a teenager stood up, placing himself between them. "Hey, leave her alone," he said, voice shaking but determined. Two other passengers immediately joined him. "We see you," an elderly woman told the harasser firmly. "And we're watching." The man backed away, then exited at the next stop. Later, that second woman would tell a reporter, "I'd seen the story about what happened with Keanu Reeves. When these people stood up for me, I asked if they'd seen it too. They all had. Stories matter. They change how we see ourselves in the narrative, bystander or upstander." A month after the incident, Sarah gave a talk at a community center about bystander intervention. Mark, Elena, Jason, Diane, and Michael attended in support. They weren't close friends. They didn't need to be. They were something else, something just as valuable, witnesses to each other's better selves. Keanu Reeves never publicly commented on the incident. During a press junket for an upcoming film, one reporter attempted to ask about the subway incident, but his publicist deflected. This wasn't surprising to those who knew his character. His good deeds were never performed for publicity or praise. But the story didn't need his verification to continue its quiet influence. In New York subway stations, small stickers began appearing. "Be the one who steps forward." No attribution, no explanation. Just a simple reminder that courage is contagious. Sarah kept the photo of the five of them on her desk at work. "Who are they?" new colleagues would sometimes ask. "People who reminded me that we have a choice," she would answer. "Every moment, in every situation, we can choose to see each other. We can choose to help." She never mentioned Keanu Reeves in these conversations, not because his intervention wasn't meaningful, but because the more powerful transformation had happened after he stepped away. In a world of viral celebrity stories that flared bright and faded quickly, this one left embers that continued to glow, warming those who encountered it with a simple truth. Heroism isn't about having power, fame, or special abilities. It's about the choice to step forward when everyone else steps back. And that choice is available to all of us at any moment, if only we're brave enough to make it. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.